Think you're thinking, Jamieson. Thank you for joining me on my trial by 7. We're 4 men short, but I'm sure we'll manage somehow. Are you ready for this? Are there no true podcasters among you?
Let's do it. I'm excited.
So today we'll discuss A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, Season 1. It's an HBO TV show. It's based on George R.R. Martin's 1998 novella, The Hedge Knight. It's set in the Game of Thrones world, about 90 years before the events of that series. And we will discuss everything, so don't listen beyond this point if you haven't seen the show or read the novellas. To give you an idea of what we're doing, first we'll start with overall impressions, high level, production teams, whatever. Then we'll go deeper, episode by episode, favorite episodes, stuff like that. Then about the novella, because we've read it. What are the differences? Which version do we like better? Do we like the changes? Stuff like that. And then final words, looking forward to season 2. But first, of course, what we need is an intro song.
Knight and a small lad walking down the road. One's got a sword, the other's got a secret. A knight with no lord, a boy with no hair, a realm full of drama, and we're pulling up a chair. So sing of Sir Duncan, tall and true, and little leg Esquire, tried and true. Now gather ye small folk, pour yourself an ale, for Duncan and egg and 3 guys telling tale.
So this is the spoiler side. I was totally charmed by this series. I thought it fired on all cylinders. I like the writing, the acting, the music, the cinematography, like the very tactile sets and locations and costumes and everything like that. Are we all on the same page for this? Any dissension here?
No, I agree. It felt like a breath of fresh air, honestly, in many regards to me. And like many people, my only complaint is that there weren't enough episodes or they weren't long enough. But then once I read the novella, I was like, they kind of covered everything. So kudos to them to not expand it too much beyond the novella, I guess.
I was thinking about the Dune spinoff when I heard of this, which also takes place in the far past in the Dune universe, I believe. And I was so underwhelmed by that series. I think I watched 3 or 4 episodes. I was like, this is just trash compared to the movie. I can't stand it. So when I heard about this, I was like, it's like they're just doing another spinoff. They're just cashing in on old IP. It's probably woke and some kind of obnoxious,
low expectations are great.
No, actually, because then I started watching. I was like, oh, this is fucking dope. And then, of course, when that music started cueing in, I was like, I got those old feelings when Game of Thrones was still really good. And I was like, oh man, it's doing it. It's happening again.
And then he's shitting his brains out.
Yeah, it cuts off in the most hilarious way.
A good way to immediately tell you this is different. The only thing I knew about this show was I saw the trailer. And I think I stopped halfway through because I was like, oh, this is good enough. I'm going to watch it. So I don't want to be spoiled. But the trailer is cut in such a way that it looks almost like pure comedy, almost like a sitcom set in the Game of Thrones universe. So I'm glad that it wasn't just that. It's way more than that.
Can I just hate on trailers for a moment?
Yes.
Trailers just ruin so many things lately. Because, for example, what was that one about the architect?
Oh, the Brutalist.
It's like a 3-hour movie. It has an intermission in it. And you see the whole thing in the trailer. I saw the trailer. I was like, I'm pretty sure I saw the whole movie. And then I started watching the movie. I think I got 3/4 of the way through. And then I had to go to bed and I just never turned it back on because it was like the trailer basically ruined that movie for me. And I've always dreamed of a movie where they just spend the money to put a black screen with the title and then the date. And then that's all they do. And then they just release the movie. But they do that for 6 months out. That
sounds like what Kanye would do to market a movie.
I mean, Kanye just broke some records with regards to concerts. So yeah, I'll take that as a compliment to the idea.
I've thought a lot about the trailers too. For me, the day the trailer died, I still remember it because I just remember thinking about fundamentally trailers have changed. Was Thor Ragnarok, because when the trailer revealed that the big fight in the arena was against the Hulk, I just had this thought of that never would have been in a trailer 10 years ago. That would have been the big reveal that you would tell your friends, you got to go see it so we can talk about it. I think back to something I had a marketing professor tell me back in college, that basically as a marketer, your only job is to get butts in seats. And so in a world where there's too much content to consume, unfortunately, apparently marketing departments have decided it's most profitable to like give away enough of the movie to make you decide this is what I want to watch. But it just sucks for those of us who want more of a mysterious and aesthetic experience because we want it to be revealed in the movie.
I wonder how many people have the exact same gripes that we have and be like, stop showing us everything. Like, it's not a grocery store. It's supposed to be like presents under the tree at Christmas. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. So it creates excitement, you know?
Yeah.
I had a heuristic for trailers that used to work, but it doesn't anymore. It used to be that the more they show you in the trailer, the worse the movie is. Because they know it's going to get bad reviews, bad word of mouth, so they have to put everything they have to get like the first wave in, and after that it's going to do bad. While if you almost see nothing in the trailer and you have no idea, they're very confident they have something really good. And that used to be the heuristic, but I think now it's like films stay in theaters so few weeks, and like there's so much competition for people's attention that they just have to put everything every time.
And it doesn't help that when someone tries to actually do that, it kind of can have blowback. Right now, a movie literally called The Drama, people are upset because they're going into it thinking it's a rom-com and finding out it's actually something very different. I haven't seen it yet, but I've looked into it. It's crazy, the difference. But the fact that people are upset with it, unfortunately, is probably only reinforcing the studios. Like, oh no, like we got to share exactly what the story's about in the trailer, which is no fun.
Okay, now I want to go see that movie because I respect that.
Yeah,
I suppose the total flip side is Project Hail Mary, which I'm pretty sure all of us here have read.
Yeah.
And I went to the movies because I really wanted to see it. But like, you know, reading the book prior is kind of like the ultimate trailer. Like, you definitely know the story. It's a bit of a different experience where you're like, all right, are they going to fuck up the book? You know, obviously this isn't about Project Hail Mary, but I really enjoyed the movie. But I was kind of like on pins and needles the whole time being like, don't mess it up, don't mess it up, don't mess it up. So I guess there's a bit of spectrum.
This was probably the feeling for this too, right? After Game of Thrones was so damaged by the ending. Like, actually, this was probably good for Night of the Seven Kingdoms because it reset expectations so low for anything else in that universe. And one thing at the center of this was a make or break thing is that the chemistry between Peter Claffey and Dexter Saul as Dunk and Egg. If that didn't work, nothing else would have worked. So I'm very, very impressed that they found a child actor that I had never heard of before, actually really good and not annoying and still young enough. It's not like someone much older that's playing young. He still has the kid voice and everything. It's going to be interesting to see in future seasons how he's changing with, you know, his voice changing and all that. But I thought he did a great job.
Yeah, they're going to have to film it fast.
From interviews I've seen with him, it's funny how it's just Dexter's one of those where like, no, that's just him. Like, he wasn't playing a character to be Egg. Like, he's just that like animated and that excitable, and which is always kind of fun to see.
The other thing that's pretty rare these days that I think they do well is that they take their time with Act 1. The kind of Netflixization, what's the word, of everything is where they assume people have no attention span. They assume they have their phone in the other hand while watching. So everything has to be spelled out. Everything has to be center of frame so it can be cut for TikTok. The lighting is always like very even. So if money, like they did the opposite of that, right? Everything is beautiful. It's well shot, but they also took their time with Act 1 so that by the time the drama comes, you care about these people and the stakes are there. I would even say, like, at first this seems like a sports movie arc where you're like, okay, like this underdog is coming in and he's going to have to prove, like, it's kind of like the Rocky arc, right? He may not win the whole thing, but he's going to show what he's made of. He's going to make friends along the way. Like, you expect one thing, right? So you're kind of like living that arc for a while until it takes quite a turn. I love that they took their time, and some of my favorite parts of the whole show are just hanging out with them in the first couple episodes as they're like, you know, making goose eggs and eating big sandwiches and laying in the grass and chatting. And like, I love that even in a show as short as this, they took their time there.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about that, where, you know, the opposite that we're gotten used to is like the Marvel-ication. Everything's like a Marvel movie where there's so much action. You're like, I don't know why anyone's doing anything right now, but there's a lot happening. I definitely appreciate the more meditative, slower human elements in a story like that too.
Okay, this is from when I first, so I watched it, then I read it, and now I've rewatched it again. So when I first watched it with no expectations, I just went into it. I remember the first real thought I had, I was so pleasantly surprised by it, was just the scope and how narrow the scope of the story is.
Yes.
And that got me thinking about how that is the real issue with these massive IPs. Their scope is too big, and they set themselves up for failure because they're never going to be able to deliver on something. And, it's Game of Thrones. It started out a more narrow scope, like still a big set pieces and multiple threads and stuff. But compared to where it ended, it was much more narrow. And then by the end, there's just no way they're going to put all the, like, I remember seeing a blog post when the show ended that literally was just, here are all of the plot lines that were dropped throughout the 8 seasons of the show. And like Marvel has the same issue, especially post Phase 4, where it's like every individual thing, it has to tell its own story, but it also has to advance the universe. And it often fails at doing both because it's just too messy, and they're promising the world, and there's no way they're going to be able to deliver the world. And so to have a story that takes place over the course of a week at one jousting tournament, and it's not trying to really make us care about that many characters, it gives itself room to actually land. And I really appreciate that. And I wish we had more IPs that were like, you know what, let's tell bite-sized stories within this world instead of trying to make everything epic.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. I wonder if it's going to stay true to that, or if,
I'm terrified that the success of season 1, I'm terrified that season 1 success is going to make executives get their fingers on it and say, we got to blow this thing up, and that's going to destroy what made season 1 so fun.
Yeah, I have to agree about the scale. Even the big themes, right? Because there are some about like legacy and class and like what makes a true knight and the weight of responsibility for others, friendship, chosen blood versus like family and all that stuff, right? Innocence corrupted by the world, all these things that could have been like big things, they're all seen through the eyes of one or two characters all the time at street levels, right? And that makes you care about that stuff more than if it was always about like armies and kingdoms and
because those same types of questions that you just said of like the themes, they tried to explore those with like Jon Snow and other characters. But the problem is Jon Snow is only on the screen for a quarter to a third of the episode most of the time. And then you're following other stories. But with this one, it's like literally everything is in service of following Dunk's storyline. And that just gives them the ability to actually take us into it more than most IPs that we consume these days. The last thing I want to say, just in terms of like me going into the show for the first time, it is interesting how the social media ification of everything actually helped this story in my experience because of that one clip that I'm sure we've all remembered and seen recently in Game of Thrones, where Joffrey is going through a book of history with Jaime there, and he turns to a page and he's like, oh, Sir Duncan the Tall. And then Joffrey expresses this amazement that Sir Duncan got 4 pages, which is like more than anyone got. And Jamie's just like, they do say he was pretty impressive. That is literally all I knew about Duncan going into the show. And so it hooked me from the beginning because I was like, I know this guy's going to end up being amazing, but right now he's nowhere near that. So like, how do we get there? And so a clip from an episode, I don't know what that was, like season 3 probably of Game of Thrones. One clip from that boosted my desire to know what this story is incredibly well. And when the show was coming out, that clip got posted on so many channels. I've seen it everywhere. That's something that never would have happened 30 plus years ago. And here we are having old IPs actually hooking me into newer ones.
That's very cool. I haven't seen that clip, so I wasn't.
Oh, really?
I wasn't hooked in that way, but it reminds me a bit of like what Taylor Sheridan's done in a few of his shows with like Yellowstone, and then the one that takes place in the 1800s and then 20 or something. He kind of like leaves seeds that show up in Yellowstone where like they bury like a skull and then they find it when they're excavating and like trying to lay pipe and stuff.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, that was something that I really appreciated about those shows. Perhaps more than anything else, to be honest.
So episode number 1, the Hedge Knight. Sir Arlen dies. Dunk heads to Ashford for a tourney. He gets refused, and that's where he realizes how few people even remember his master and how like you can live a whole life trying to do the right thing and nobody notices or remembers. He meets Stencil and Lionel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm. I think, to me, this character is stealing every scene that he's in. Oh. And that's when he takes a very resourceful egg for a squire. establishing right from the start that this is not Game of Thrones, right? Even the subversion of the music, the theme, and shitting everywhere, that's a big one. I'm glad the whole show wasn't about that, because that's not my favorite bit of it, but I see what they were going for there. But just establishing that this is about like very, very like low level people in that world. The pilot has 0 action scenes, basically no horrific twists, right? This is also very different. And I love the line at the end when he's talking to Lionel, right? And he's asking like, what chance do I really have? And like, you have none, you have no chance, but it's a great honor to test yourself against a worthy foe, right? You can kind of see like, even if he can enter the tournament, the system is not made in such a way that he should be able to do much.
Yeah. I hadn't pieced that together. There's no action sequences in the first episode. The closest thing to an action sequence, I guess, would be all the dancing, which
the foot stomping thing. That was great. That kind of like testing each other. Who's the alpha here?
Yeah.
Can you stand up to me? Everything Lionel does is great.
I am such a sucker for that character, and I want to shake the hand of whatever writer decided like this is a character we need to flesh out more from the novella, because just what a value add, in my opinion. Like I remember I wrote this down, like the first real introduction, we've seen shots of him sitting at his banquet table so far, but he hasn't spoken yet. And the first thing that we really hear him say is him yelling to the crowd, "I've had a profound thought, if anyone would care to listen." And then what's even funnier is he ends up totally forgetting what he was going to say, and he just kind of like moves on from it. But yeah, he was such a fresh, just kind of side character that ultimately does end up bringing a lot of value to helping Dunk understand what it means to be a knight. You know, there's a scene, another note I wrote from that episode. There's a scene towards the end after the dancing where Lionel and Dunk are just sitting talking, and Dunk's wearing his crown because like they're already
very drunk.
They're already just like that level of buddies. And they're talking about like some great feat that Lionel did. And Dunk's like, "Weren't you scared?" And the line I wrote, he said, this is Lionel saying, "Within every man, there are many men, but that which I had to do, Stormlanders have always done. And if they had done it, I could do it too." That's such a protagonism coded like idea right there, right? Just this idea, like if it has been done, you know, there's a quote from Marcus Aurelius that I love. "If a thing is humanly possible, consider it within your reach." This guy who's there, he's already made it. And he's telling Dunk, like, "Look, man, you're going to be terrified sometimes, but like people have done it, so you can do it too." He's like the comedic relief and also the sage of this show, essentially, in one character.
It was pretty great how they start to interact too, because he's like, "What are you doing in my tent?" He's like,
"Are you coming for my head?" No, like, yeah. Supper.
No, supper. He's like, "Well, that makes sense. Like, actually, yeah, everyone's hungry."
You almost can't imagine that someone would be kind of as naive as Dunk is, right? He's like, "Well, the stranger is here. He must want something. He must have plans." And no, he's just hungry.
He just wants some food.
I also like just the very first things we see of Dunk when he's kind of reasoning out, like, what should I do now that Sir Arlen's dead? You kind of can tell he's like, he's not really ambitious. It's not like he's just always dreamed of rising to this. I mean, to some extent, he's probably always wanted to be a knight. But the way he has to kind of work himself to the position of like, I'm going to go to the tournament and claim that he made me knight, it feels less like he's just grasping with ambition and more just like, this is an opportunity. Like he sees an opportunity and he's like, I should at least try it. And I just felt like that's a very relatable thing to a lot of people where like, you may not be the most ambitious person, but you're going to still have opportunities just kind of present themselves, but you have to make the choice of, do I pursue it or not?
And there's a seed planted there for the last episode, right? So he's like, what are my choices? And I can join the city guard. Stop raping, sir. Or I can sell the horses and maybe eat for a year or two.
Yeah.
Or there's this tourney. And his big ambition is basically, maybe I can be noticed there and some big lord will take me into their house, right? And I'll have a place to sleep and some food. That's the big ambition.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, you know, is he's trying to think of like, well, what are my options? He doesn't have that many options. So it's kind of like he accidentally burned the boats by just like tagging along with this knight. He's like, oh, I kind of forgot to graduate and stuff, but I'm like stuck in this perpetual like craft that I don't really know. He's like, I guess I got to do it now. Yeah. So that idea of accidentally burning the boats, like, oh shit, what did I do? Maybe I should have learned a few other things along the way.
Episode 2, Hard Salt Beef. This is the one where he struggles the most to prove his knighthood. Like nobody remembers Arlen. People are super dismissive of him. Baylor was the only one who can vouch for his old master, has a great memory of him. And clearly, even as the heir to the throne, right, he's noticing people way, way lower than him on the totem pole. There's the tug of war with the boys, right? More great scenes. Tansel paints the new sigil. And Dunk has to sell one of the horses to even buy armor, right? That's how destitute he is as a knight. He has a robe for a belt, no armor, and he thinks he can enter this tournament with people who have been training under the greatest masters, right? So at least he has self-belief.
I loved this episode because it's the first testing of his mettle, right? And he hasn't even fought yet. Like he's not done any jousting or anything, but there are some real moments where he's just like, am I cut out for this, actually? Okay, the first action sequence really of the show, if you don't count the tug of war, is the 5v5 jousting at night. And that was such a fun scene. I loved that scene. I haven't looked into if that was ever a thing in actual jousting back in the day, but the idea that it's just this melee of 1v1s and they're just running back and forth and stuff was so cool. But you see, as he's watching, you see him like so pumped, and then you kind of see his face just
so
fall.
afraid at the same time, right?
That's gonna be me. Like, am I cut out for this? And then when he's back at camp and he still seems kind of shaken, he says this line, "Do great knights live in the hedges and die by the side of a muddy road?" Like he's asking, like, am I actually the same kind of guy as the rest of these?
It's kind of the Egg's line. I don't remember in which episode it is, maybe in this one or the first one, but like when they're introduced, right? He's like, "I'm Sir Duncan the Tall. Never heard of him. Do you know every knight of the Seven Kingdoms?" The good ones.
The good ones. He's such a snarky little shit sometimes. Like, I love at the end when he's like, the 9 kingdoms. And he's like, what are you talking about? There's 7. He's like, no, there's 9. He just lists them off. It's like, oh, wow, no one has counted in a while.
Another great visual gag when you see Arlen at the beginning with a prostitute, I guess. And like, I love how some podcasters have nicknamed him the Long Night. And on first viewing, so that's one thing I loved is that I knew nothing about this, right? So I had no idea that who Egg was, right, coming in. But on second viewing, you can see all these little suspicious things that Egg does when the Targaryens are mentioned, or when, like, will I have to go to the castle? And when he sees the flag, he has all these reactions that make sense when you know, but when you don't, they're pretty easy to miss. I love how they did that. It was very effective for me because, well, we'll talk about it in the next episode, but I didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
And I love that I was fooled.
To me, this episode is a great example of the creators showing, not telling, because it's a big theme that Dunk is not intelligent, right? The line is that Sir Arlen always told him he was thick as a castle wall. And there's a scene in episode 2 that just demonstrates this so perfectly. And I love it so much. It's when he and Egg are like sitting at a table after he's kind of made a fool of himself in front of, I'm trying to remember what the puppeteer's name is.
Oh, Tansel.
So he's like made a fool of himself in front of Tansel. He's like asking Egg about it. But I somehow the conversation shifts to Egg saying how like he's always made fun of for being short. And he says, everyone tells me I'm short for my age. And Duck says, well, everyone always told me I was stupid. And then he just stops talking. And Egg prompts him. He's like, and Duck's like, clues, like, and what? He's like, and what did you tell people when they said you're stupid? He's like, what business of that is yours? My problems are my own. And then Egg says, I thought you were trying to help me. And it ends with him saying, help you what? Grow? The fact that he's just so clueless. But that they're not just reinforcing it with other people telling him you're an idiot. Like, they're showing him being thick as a castle wall.
Yeah. That and the insecurity is they just show it, right? When someone says like, "Oh, that's a sword," he's like, "It's my sword by right," right? Or he's always like defensive and like, "Oh yeah, I'm a knight." He protests a little bit too much.
Yeah.
Maybe part of the thought there is that there are some things that are more virtuous than just being smart. Where like if you have a sense of what's good and right and you're willing to stand up and like put yourself in harm's way in order to stand up for what you think is right, in a lot of cases that's better than being smart.
Yeah.
The Targaryens are clearly very smart and educated, right? But
and what does that get to?
And they're also psychos.
Yeah. Episode number 3, the Squire. That's where Plumber, the guy who keeps like spitting everywhere, is trying to get Dunk into a rigged fight, which is not in the novella. And that's another one that kept me thinking, okay, this is the sports movie arc, right? There's going to be some drama there, but Dunk refuses for honor. And this is a real test because it's not you have to lose, you have to win, right? It's harder to refuse winning than losing, but he still does it, even though he has absolutely nothing. Aerion acts like a total psycho, the attorney. He kills a horse on purpose, according to Egg, breaks the other guy's leg. There's the fortune teller that tells Egg that he will be king and die in flames. At night, Aerion attacks Tansel, right? Because he goes to the puppet show and the puppet dragon is losing. I love those puppets. They did a great job there. And so he starts breaking her fingers and Dunk just like kicks his ass. There's like sees red and also remembers his vows, right? And right before he's about to be curb stomped like in American History X, Eggs enter the room and reveals that he's Aegon Targaryen. And literally when this happened, like I stood up in my living room, my jaw dropped, and I just stood there for 15 seconds. And this happens so rarely, right? There's all these films with twists and reveals, but somehow with this one, I was still in the Rocky mode, right? This is going to be like the sports movie for Night's thing, and I just didn't see it coming at all. And to me, it was a great twist. I'm glad I wasn't spoiled. And it's also like the season's tonal turn, right? From there, it's like a different show. Everything before makes sense in a new way. I love the execution of this.
The fortune teller gave it away for me. When she said that he would be king, I was like, oh, this boy isn't who he fucking says he is. He's a shyster. So when that big reveal came, I was like, yeah, that fortune teller was telling the truth.
I think I had some idea something was coming, but I didn't see it coming that quickly and that big, right? I thought, oh yeah, something's going to happen or he's going to grow into someone or whatever, but not, he's already one of the two missing boys.
Well, and just prove that I am also as thick as a castle wall. I did know enough that I knew he was royalty in disguise, but it never crossed my mind that he was like Arion's brother. So I was equally shocked when I probably shouldn't have been.
His reaction to that fortune teller when he was like actually very concerned. He's like, why would you say that? Why is he taking this so seriously unless it really rings true as being a possibility with him? Like most kids would be like, I'm going to be king. Like, what are you talking about, you crazy old hag? But he's like, wait a minute.
Well, they execute it in a way that they say that, then it moves on to something else very quickly. So maybe I'm thick as a castle wall too, but I didn't have time to process it and think about it. I'm already on to something else. So if the reveal was in a different episode, I think it would have been easier to connect the dots.
They move on so cleverly because Dunk starts laughing his head off. Like that is the most ridiculous thing he's ever heard. So that kind of undermines our ability to process it as realistic, even though that was just very cleverly their way of like putting the truth in plain sight. But yeah, like he laughs harder at that than anything in the entire series because he's like, that's such a funny thing for you to say.
Now that I think of it, there's an inversion there because the whole time Dunk is the naive one and Egg is like the more cynical and educated one. And in this interaction, it's like from Dunk's point of view, Egg is being naive. It's like, you believe that? They tell you a good story and whatever, and he's laughing. And Dunk thinks he's the more cynical one here, even though in this world, prophecies exist.
I loved in this episode how it starts out with him sick. He's like vomiting with anxiety, only to realize he actually can't even fight that day because he's not of royal blood.
I wasted all of my anxiousness on. It reminds me of a great anecdote. I think it's by James Hetfield, the singer and rhythm guitarist of Metallica. And he told a story about he was sitting in a bar and there's this guy on the other side of the bar looking at him and he's looking back and the guy keeps staring at him. And so he gets madder and madder and he's angry. He's like, looking at him. And then after a while, he realizes the other guy is blind and he doesn't see him at all. And he's like, oh, I wasted all my hate. And like, it reminds me a bit of Dunk. Like he's psyching himself up the whole day and he's like, and then it's all for nothing.
You mentioned that first fight or the first joust that Aerion does. Such a great way to establish him as a villain. We've already had the scene where he's just being very dismissive of Dunk and he's like, oh, knighthood has really fallen far if you're a knight. Like very snarky. But when it comes to what type of characters or animals a villain will harm, this is just my own processing. I haven't like read this in some narrative book anywhere, but the more noble the animal, the crueler it seems. So if it's a useless animal, it's like, oh, you shouldn't do that. Like, that's terrible, but whatever. But like, if they kill a dog or if they kill a horse, it's just like, oh, this guy's nasty. And the way he kills it was just so like that was the moment where I was able to place like, okay, so Aerion's at this level of villain. Like I know exactly how disgusting of a person he is if he's willing to do that. That scene, as hard as it was to watch, it's like, okay, they've told me who this guy is now.
Yeah, the economy of the writing is amazing. Like, even when you first meet him and he thinks he's a stable boy, and then you meet the Knights Guards, right? Very short scene, but then you know right away, okay, these guys are badasses. They seem like good guys, but they may not be working for good guys. The jousting is also very, very economical, right? One scene and you know exactly who he is. And these are supposed to be honor-bound people that follow certain rules, and they're play acting at war, right? That's why they're wearing so much armor, and they're not supposed to like try to kill each other on purpose. But this guy's like, yeah, I kind of see a loophole here, right? And it's like, aim for the horse. Oh, accident.
It's weird how killing a horse is kind of looked down upon more than killing the actual guy. Where like the crowd is like really bummed out about the horse when like there's guys are gonna die on this field.
Yeah, but the guy can fight back, right?
Yeah, he made a choice to be there, I guess, is a difference.
Yeah, in that world, war horses are also probably like one of the highest prized possession that someone can have.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so it's more like splashing paint on the Mona Lisa kind of thing, is what you're saying?
Next one, episode 4-7. Dunk is in prison. Egg reveals all about himself. I love the cinematography, right? The whole show is beautiful. It's super well shot. It's very different from a lot of TV these days that's like doing the bare minimum. I love how they start with like, it looks like a starry sky, and then it's the prison ceiling. They do a lot of these parallel. I'll put in the show note a video that someone has made of different parallels in the show, different scenes across episodes that mirror each other. Anyway, all that stuff looks great, so it's harder to describe. I'll put the video in the show notes. Then there's Darren that shares his dream, right? The dead dragon dream. Dunk is trying to assemble the 7 champions because clearly Aerion is afraid of facing Dunk on his own. He's looking at the guy. It's like, 6'7" or something. Like, I found this old like law about this thing we can do. Egg is doing great work because he knows a lot of these guys, right? So he helps recruit. Stefan defects. So Raymond is knighted right there. That's such a cool moment. I love that. I love the callbacks to Arlen. Baylor, the big reveal at the end, Baylor joins on Dunk's side. That was another like goosebump moment for me. And then they play the music non-ironically. I thought this was another great episode.
Yeah, the bit about the villain knowing all of the little loopholes just makes me think of tax evasion and how so many uber wealthy people are just obsessed with trying to evade taxes and like, have an army of lawyers just to pay a ton of money just to avoid paying a ton of money. And it's more about like the fact that like not to villainize rich people, of course, but the villain is very tuned into all of these details that otherwise like normal people are like, what are you talking about?
And even his father is calling him out on it, right? He's kind of like, this is bullshit. Like, okay, it's your right, but really? Is that really? That's the way you want to go? And as a prince, like I don't think anybody else kind of would call him out except his father. But I love that detail where at this point in the arc, like Makar is kind of also shown as kind of a villain kind of guy. But even he is like, what the hell are you doing?
I think it's that in the show, Makar doesn't know what a Trial 7 is. In the novella, they don't make that assumption. But the fact that his own father is like, what is that? And they're like, yeah, it's this really old thing from is it the Andorels? Is the name of the ancient people?
Eldens, yeah. Well, if it's the Eldens, then okay.
Yeah. Well, but just the fact that he's like, I don't. And so to me, when that moment happened, I was like, yeah, Aerion, you really are a crafty little bastard. Like you know all these things that your father doesn't even know. And to Tinker's point, like he knows all the ways to avoid the taxes of his mistakes. I thought that was a very interesting detail of a small change to make that just sets up Aerion's character even more.
Yeah, and it's totally a way to use his position too, right? Because if the fight is supposed to be about honor and you're one-on-one, that's one thing. But if you're like, oh yeah, we'll just pick 7 people. Oh, by the way, I'm going to have like a few of the king's guards on my side. So the best fighters in the whole realm on my side. And everybody's going to want to join. This first time this type of fights happened in 100 years. And they're sure my side's going to win. So everybody's going to want to be on my side. Totally fair, right?
It's like showing up to a bar fight with a few Navy SEALs. It's like, come on, dude. Like, that's not fair. Like, all of us are drunk and you bring these guys?
I really loved the quiet scene that's just Dunk and Prince Baylor where they're kind of talking about his action and like, is this not what I'm supposed to do as a knight? And he's like, wouldn't you have done the same? And he's like, yeah, but I'm a crown prince, not a hedge knight. And then Dunk, in his simplistic purity, Dunk just says, don't all knights make the same oath to protect the innocent? Like, should it matter that you're a crown prince and I'm not if I'm just fulfilling the one thing I'm sworn to do as a knight? So good. To what we were talking about earlier of like someone as simple as him versus the complex intellectuals of the Targaryens, which, are up there with the Lannisters in terms of the families of Game of Thrones that are the most cerebral and smart. He just kind of challenges that with this very simple question. It's like, how do you talk around that without it seeming like a justification?
Actually, that makes me realize that there's an inversion with Dunk and Egg where Egg thinks like an adult and Dunk thinks like a child, but in a way that like really clarified, like if you have children or if you've spent time with a lot of children, you'll find that they have a wisdom that adults seem to forget as they get older. And it's like, well, why do you do that? It's like, well, I need money. It's like, well, why do you need money? It's like, well, so I can go fishing. It's like, can't you just go fishing? There's that old like story of like the rich guy who goes on vacation and talks to a fisherman. He's like, oh, well, you could buy like several more boats and then you could create a franchise and then a corporation and then get super rich. And he's like, well, what would I do with all that money? He's like, then you could fish every day. He's like, well, I already do that.
You retire
so
and you fish.
Exactly. It's kind of like Dunk has that childlike sort of wisdom that comes off as, most of the time it comes off as like stupid and naive, like the conversation, Jameson, that you were mentioning earlier, where he's like, oh, everyone called me like stupid. But, it clarifies situations in this instance with Baelor where it's like, well, isn't that what a knight's supposed to be? And it's like, oh, maybe most adults are actually cluttering the situation with so many concepts and ideas and context that they fail to like see through it all in terms of like what's actually important here and what should we prioritize.
Clearly, that's one of the big themes here. You are what you do, not some label, right? And so there are lots of knights around, but if they don't behave like knights, if they don't have true honor, right? Everybody's even telling Dunk, like, maybe you should just run away, right? It's like, well, I'm in this, I'm going to do it, right? His actions make him much more of a true knight than most of the others.
Speaking of comparing him to other knights, Liberty, with your comparison of how it first felt like a sports movie, I always struggle when a character that you shouldn't like actually has a baller line. Because when he's talking to Raymond and Stefan is there, and Stefan has this line that's like, this would be the best line if this were a sports movie. He says, I do not know why tragedy so oft follows after honorable men, but when I find myself without the answer is always more glory.
Well, it sets up the fall in the next episode, right? Because at that moment, you kind of like that guy. You're like, oh, he's kind of a badass. He's an asshole with his cousin, but when the shit hits the fan, he's there, right? He's going to be there for Dunk. And then,
yeah. And then before that reveal, but when we're at the arena and Dunk's like thanking everybody, there's another classic Lionel moment that made me laugh so hard, where Dunk is like, oh, thank you guys for coming. He's like, and thanks to Stefan for getting you. And Lionel just goes, who the hell is Sir Stevron? Like, he says the name completely wrong. And he's just like, who's that guy? Like, we're not here because of him. But yeah, just any scene Lionel was in, I was excited for more interactions with him.
Anything else for that episode?
Classic slow-mo music set to it. They used all the cheat codes of like getting you hyped, but the scene where Dunk is walking up to the stand, I guess, but we're lingering on Lionel knighting Raymond, and it's just like the slow-mo of the sword tapping his shoulders, and the right that he says, I wrote it down because of course I wrote it down. He says, in the name of the warrior I charge you to be brave, in the name of the father I charge you to be just, in the name of the mother, I charge you to protect the young and innocent. And at first I was like expecting more than 3 lines, but then afterwards I was like, I like that it's actually just that simple. It's just like, be brave, be just, and protect the innocent. That is all it takes to be a knight. The next episode is in the name of the mother, right? So it's like, it's challenging us to linger on, in what way does this episode show them protecting the young and the innocent in a way?
I love that knighthood in that world is outside of the typical hierarchy of like the nobles and the houses and everything, but anyone can make a knight. Even Baylor, he calls Dunk sir, and he recognized that stuff, even if like some lowly hedge knight knighted by someone he barely remembers from 16 years ago, at some like whatever. That system is accepted, and it's one of the few kind of meritocratic parts of their system, apparently, where if you are brave enough, if you are good enough, you could squire for someone and become a knight and do great things without noble blood or whatever. So the next one is In the Name of the Mother. This is one where the Trial of Seven begins, and it begins quite roughly, but very quickly goes into a flashback where we learn about Dunk's flea-bottomed childhood and how Sir Arlen saved him. When he comes out like drunk and swings his sword around, he says, "In the name of the mother, let that child be," or whatever. And that's for protecting the young and innocent, right? That he remembered his oath. He remembers what a true knight is. The flashback is a big part of the episode. And on the first viewing, I had a bit more of a trouble with it. I was like, no, I want to go back. I want to see what happens, right? But on the second viewing, I liked it a lot more because the way they shot the fight in POV and very, very confusing and brutal. And I don't think you could have had that for like 30 minutes of that, right? It needed to be pretty short. Having the flashback there works for me. Showing where he grew up and how he grew up makes the second part of the fight make sense, where he basically ends up defeating Aerion, not because he's a better knight than him at like traditional swordplay and all that. He's clearly outmatched in many ways, right? The sword thrown in the leg and the dagger in the hand, and he barely stands on his horse for a minute at the beginning of things. Like he's clearly outmatched in most things, but sheer grit, right? Street fighting abilities, that's what makes him triumph and win in the end, right? When he's just bashing Aerion's head in with his own shield, and you see the shield crumbling. That's what he has that these princelings and pampered guys don't have. I love when he's dragging Aerion by the foot in the mud, the most humiliating way to lose a fight possible. Aerion kind of, I forfeit. Yeah, looking almost like a child. I thought this was really well done. I like that they made the fight confusing because it's mostly Dunk's perspective. Every episode so far has been mostly Dunk's perspective on things. And so they didn't all of a sudden have drones flying around and tried to... No. You're in his shoes for that moment. I thought that was great. The ending also has a huge reveal, which is that during the fight, Maekar hits Baylor, and basically the only thing holding his skull together was his helmet. So he dies at the end. This is another one of these, like, the good guys technically win, but they still lose moments. I thought this was another great episode. Very dark, lots of fog and everything. I wish we could see a bit more at times, but I think it turned out very well.
I really like the flashback too. For one, you need to like flesh out the episode. 6 episodes is pretty short. And then I read the novella, and of course this is added extra. And, it adds a little bit more depth. It kind of explains why he's, maybe such of like an inexperienced virgin, because like he had his heart like kind of like wrecked when he was like a little boy before he could even get started in the whole like having a crush while actually in puberty sort of thing. So I loved it because when you finally come back to the fight, I thought that the transition was kind of perfect. Yeah, it was fantastic. And then at the very end, when we realize Baylor, you make that point, like the good guys win, but it's kind of like Superman gets sacrificed to save like Robin in the superhero universe, where you're like, oh, was that really like a worthy trade? And of course, that's a big point of what happens in the last episode. But as Jameson's already pointed out with regards to Joffrey, he gets like 4 pages in the end. So it seems like he's probably going to live up to the sacrifice, but definitely a steep one in the eyes of the audience of the world.
Seeing him as Dunk of Fleabottom is interesting. I shared the same feeling, Liberty, of like, I want to get back to the fight. So the first watch, I was a little more impatient with it. When I watched it the second time, I realized that Dunk doesn't just feel betrayed by Egg when he learns that he's a prince because he lied to him, but it's because you notice the moments in the first couple episodes where Dunk starts feeling close, like he starts feeling some sort of connection with Egg. It's when he makes bad assumptions, but he makes assumptions that, oh, this guy's just like me.
Yeah.
When he's like, I'll take you back where you're from. And he's like, oh, it's a long way to King's Landing. And he's like, oh, King's Landing, that must mean he's from Fleabottom, just like me. He had created this false image that Egg is just like him, and he felt this need to like protect him and help him the way Sir Arlen had helped Dunk from this flashback. And that was kind of shattered, and he felt like a fool of just like, I can't believe I thought that like this kid needed my help, when in reality, like he's just playing hooky from his duties as a prince. Overall, that flashback, it was very interesting to give more depth to his character. Tinker mentioned this, but ultimately, the thing that makes it all worth it is the way that it leads up to that line of "get up," like Sir Arlen saying
Shivers
"get up"
down my spine,
and the way that it's reused throughout the rest of that episode is just kind of the battle cry of just like "get up." Like, you're not saying kill him, you're not saying like, but he's just like, do not die on your back, like get up. Yeah, I'm getting like hyped just like requoting that again, which leads to another thing I love from when he does get up. David Goggins talks about how he loves taking souls. Like, he loves doing things that make people's face just fall because they thought there's no way he was going to be able to do that. He cites from Rocky, when Rocky gets up, whatever round it is where Apollo thinks he's finished him and he's like celebrating, and then the crowd starts like cheering in a way that makes him turn around, and when he sees Rocky standing up, his face just falls. And so that's what David Goggins calls taking a soul. And you see Dunk take Aerion's soul after he has that callback of get up, and like he can't see through one eye, he can barely stand on his 2 feet, but when Aerion turns around, you just see his face, and he's just like, oh no, like I can't believe. But yeah, so like Dunk took his soul in that moment, and that kind of turned the tides.
And I love how this fight was like, they could have gone all kinds of ways, right? Because Dunk is massive, right? So maybe he could have just won through like, oh, he's better than we expected or whatever. No, they take the die hard approach. He's almost dead, right? He's barely like hanging in there. Everybody's over him, but he just went through like sheer not giving up. Like, yeah. I love that. To me, that feels more earned. When he does win, the price he has to pay is so much better than if he somehow had dominated from the start.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but you point that out of like, because he's finally in a domain where he should have an advantage for the first time in the show, they had to cripple him essentially right off the bat in the jousting portion where he's not experienced. He had to take a hit early on to put him on somewhat of a level playing field. If it just started on foot with a sword, like it would have been hard to make a fight that we wouldn't have been like, yeah, he should have won that pretty easily.
It's also just this idea of, get back up is clearly the core of this episode, maybe the show. And you think about entrepreneurs, business, in so many cases, just having persistence and the ability to outlast the competition in the long run is often one of the, if not the most important quality. People give up on things so quickly because, oh, I'm not talented in this. They try it once and the drawing is shit, so they stop trying to become an artist, all that sort of thing. So I love it. Like, if the show has like a clear sort of moralistic tone to it, I love what it's picked, which is just like, just get up, just keep going. Just get up, just keep going.
Yeah.
You don't have to be the smartest. You don't have to be the most well-trained. You don't have to have royal blood. You don't have to have fancy armor. Just keep getting up.
Amen.
Oh yeah, I love the blacksmith that's like, I don't make the fancy shit that looks like fruit and dragons and stuff. I just make good steel.
Yeah.
One of the themes that I didn't really notice on first viewing, but I stood out more to me on second and reading the novella. There's a lot of grieving and loss in this, right? So from the first episode, Dunk, the whole time he's basically grieving his master, his father figure that he just lost. Probably spent a while grieving Rafe. And then when he meets Arlen is grieving his lost squire for a while, right? So he's acting all erratic and drunk and all that, and you're like, oh, old crazy old man. But then you're like, yeah, but he just lost someone, and he's probably like in that process. That's been Dunk's life up to that point. So when he gets attached to Egg, and then right away he's already losing him. He's already like, that must be all part of what's going on in his head in that moment.
Yeah, very true. The last thing I'll have to say about this episode, which is just a little kind of fun fact that I didn't pick up on until the second viewing. What was kind of cool about the fight is the fact that it is just Dunk's perspective, even though there's a lot of people fighting. You don't ever hear a line of dialogue during the fight from like Raymond or anyone that we're established as side characters. But I like rewound it to make sure, but we do actually see the shot where Maekar hits Baylor in the head.
Yeah, and I think he was going to his son, right? He was trying to protect his son or something.
I think the way I interpreted it was more just like he didn't see who it was. He just knew someone was behind him. And so he just swings his... They call it a mace, but it's like a mace and chain or a flail, honestly. But he just swings it blindly without really seeing who's behind him. And he hits Baylor like in the back of the head because he's swinging it around like that. But yeah, so that was like an interesting, like, okay, like, so it's actually like shown in there. Whereas no character, they all assume it was Makar, but no one can actually be like, yes, I saw it happen. It's like, oh, we as the audience actually do see it happen.
I didn't pick up on that. That's interesting.
It's so fast. Like you'd have no clue the first viewing, but when you're watching a second time and you know that's what happened, like the clip kind of stood out to me.
I didn't do it myself, but I've heard on some podcasts, some people like frame by frame analyzing the background during the fight. And like you see when Beesbury dies or when the King's Guard is like, go protect, like they really choreograph this thing very well, even if most people just won't see it.
You love that. You love when they put the attention into the detail that they know most people aren't even going to notice, but they just care enough about the craft that they're like, we need to do this for ourselves. Even more respect to the production team on that.
Nice little Easter egg.
Yeah.
Final episode is the morrow, aftermath of everything, right? This is a pattern that you see like in The Wire. The last episode is just kind of like, what happens after the big thing.
The denouement.
Exactement. So Maker exiles Aerion to the Free Cities. He offered Dunks a place at Summerhall and for Egg to be a squire. So if we go back to episode 1, right, this was the dream. This was what Dunk really wanted. He's like, if I'm lucky and this thing goes well, the best I can hope for is I'm part of some great house somewhere and I live in a castle and I have food and a soft bed. And so he gets exactly what he wants. But by then, his arc, like he's a changed person. He sees the price of all this. He sees what is happening to these Targaryen that live there, right? Like the whole speech about how Egon probably never slept in a ditch and all of his steaks are rare and bloody and all that, and look what happened. So he refuses. I love how Maker's arc here is interesting because he has more dimensions by the end, right? Because you realize that he knows he's screwed up. When he says, this is my last son, all of his sons are alive, but he knows he's lost all of them except Egg. So that's what makes him a more complicated character. He's trying to do the right thing, even if he's failing so far.
Yeah.
I love the sense in this episode that Dunk has, he doesn't have rose-colored glasses about like knighthood and under some lore. And he's like, oh, you're just a pet if that's what you do. You're essentially just cosplaying the well-intentioned aspects of a knight that should be put into action. It's like, no, you're just a house pet for some lord. He's like, no, I want to actually go out into the world and try to actually do good things. That's where my calling really is. And I was disillusioned by all of the pomp and circumstance and the fancy, shit that they do on chest plates and shields and whatnot. So yeah, you mentioned he grows quite a bit in such a short time, which if you think about it, he's been following his previous master for so long. He's kind of wonder why he's always been an audience member, because at the beginning of this show, when he's like watching the jousting, he's still like very much enthralled by all of it. But once he finally gets into the arena and gets his ass handed to him, but also triumphs, he realizes that there's just a completely different edge to what he's actually pursuing, and it clarifies it by the end.
Not only that, but I think we skipped over probably the most memorable line of the show in the past episode when he does his big Braveheart speech. Are there no true knights among you? And like, nobody comes, and the big guy farts, and everybody laughs. And like, for most people, this knighthood thing, it's a label. It's not a true way of life. The vows are just like convenient. When I want to do it, sure, but yeah.
It reminds me of, I don't know where in the Rick and Morty universe it is, when Rick says something to the effect of like, I've seen what makes you cheer, your boos mean nothing to me. Yeah. And so Dunk has like the unironic disillusionment that's the same thing, where he's like, really? Like, there's a just cause here, and like none of these sons of bitches are going to come help me? It's like, all right, you all suck.
We have to address what is the most curious thing about this episode, which is that it starts with jazz music.
Yes.
For the first time in the series. When I watched it a second time, I did pick up on there a few times where there's music that's like a little more contemporary than you'd expect, but it's still just very like instrumental and melodic. And then all of a sudden it opens with this jazz music, and you've got Lionel and his maester just staring down at Dunk, who's just propped up against the tree. And I mean, this is the end of the episode, but then the season ends with a song from like the 40s or 50s that is about being indebted to an organization that you'll never pay off. Yeah. I would love to ask the showrunners, like, okay, what was the move here? I don't hate it, but it definitely it felt anachronistic. Like it kind of took you out of it a little bit.
Even as a huge fan of jazz,
right?
To me, it didn't quite work. I see what they were going for. The whole rest of the show is going for some of these, right? The explosive diarrhea at first. Like they're trying to subvert a few things. Now, I felt like this was one of these. It didn't fully work for me, but it didn't ruin it either. So it's fine. It's okay.
Speaking of how Makar shows more depth in this episode, Lionel shows so much depth when he gets mad.
I love you like a brother, or then I'll hate you like a brother.
Yeah. But I love when he blows up at Dunk, because Dunk's like lamenting, like, oh no, like this prince died for me, like I'm not worthy of that or whatever. And he snaps, and Lionel just says, the prince fought for you against men sworn to protect him. He risked nothing, and the gods don't favor a fraud. I love that, because, you know, we've been very like, oh, Baylor's a good dude. Like, what a guy. Like, he put himself on the line. And then you see this perspective from Lionel that kind of reframes it of like, sure, this freak accident ended up killing him, but like in his head, he doesn't think that Baylor was really risking much at all.
Yeah.
And that line of like, the gods don't favor a fraud. I was like, ooh, like that. I love that concept of just like this universal justice, even if man is incapable of playing fair, like the universe or God will make things even to some extent.
Actually, I think there's even more to your point, because right before the battle, Baylor says, oh, I'll take the Kingsguard because they've sworn an oath, so they literally can't try to hurt me. Which I remember thinking when I heard that, I was like, that's a pretty like low way to go about it. Like, oh, you're gonna go try to kill the guys who literally are not allowed to try and hurt you. Like, that's pretty lame, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he would try to really hurt the King's Guards either.
He was
but
basically
just
trying to take those pieces off the board. Yeah.
Which was still kind of a dick move, but
Hopefully.
But it's definitely not as noble as like, I might die, but I'm willing to die for you because you're doing the right thing.
yeah.
It was more just like, you're going to get killed if I don't do this.
Yeah, it plays into the point where he's not taking an actual risk. Like, he's taking the safest part of the battle, which technically does help the cause.
Yeah.
Though if he didn't join, I think they would have to forfeit because they don't have 7. So I think he was probably thinking like, okay, I'm going to give you your chance. But yeah, it's a more gray move than it would seem. At first, it seems super heroic, but maybe
And
not.
so when we see that reaction from Lionel, who in the lead up to the battle is making jokes about like, I'm not going to miss out on the first battle of 7 in 100 years. Like, are you kidding me? Like, he's always been the carefree, I'm bored with my life as a royal, so I'm always looking for stimulation, adventure, to like see this outburst from him. Where
Yeah,
he's
he
just
shows
like,
what he really cares about, right?
Yeah, which is like, he does really see Dunk as a brother. And so to see Dunk almost kind of prioritizing Baylor when like, I put my life on the line even more for you than Baylor did. Like, what are you talking about? I loved that. And I can't wait to see, like, I hope, you know, I haven't read the other novellas, so I don't know if Lionel ever shows up again, but I hope that we see that character more.
2 other big revelations in the episode are, it's kind of confirmed that Arlen never knighted Dunk. Because you see him on the night he died, right? And so he couldn't have happened after, and it hadn't happened before. And he asked him, like, why did you never knight me? Were you afraid I would leave you?
Yeah.
And the other big thing is at the very end, after Egg is back and like, oh yeah, my father said I could serve you. It's almost like a sitcom ending or whatever, but Maker's like, Egg!
Where the fuck is
For
he?
real.
I love that ending.
A couple of lines from just the meat of the episode. First of all, interesting, since you pointed out, Liberty, like the first episode has no action and the final episode has no action. This episode honestly gave me really strong, I think it's episode 2 of the final season of Game of Thrones, the one that's just in the castle before the Battle of Winterfell, which most people agree is like the only decent episode in that season, because it's just character depth. It's just people revealing their fears and like their hopes and dreams as they're like staring down the barrel of this suicidal fight. And so this had kind of similar vibes in the sense of like, it's just small moments where we're getting reveals about these characters. there's so much foreshadowing with this line. Again, we know like Sir Duncan the Tall ends up being massive. And there's this line when he's talking to Maekar and he says like, there might come a morrow where I'll have need of that foot and the realm will need that foot even more than a prince's life. And it's like, okay, so that's definitely happening, but I can't wait to see like what that actually looks like because I don't know what shape that takes.
Maekar's response is like, "There's plenty of hedge knights, you idiot."
There's as many hedge knights as there are hedges.
Exactly.
And then another little kind of foreshadowing, but in a much more playful way, when Egg saying something to Dunk, and he just says, "Are you mad?" And Egg says, "Is that relevant?"
I love that. That was so good. It's like, yeah, I might be mad, but if I'm right, like, hello.
Yeah, what does it matter?
It's that relevant.
I gotta mention another funny moment. Like maybe Guy most likely to reply to a Nigerian prince letter. Raymond getting engaged to the prostitute and having no understanding of how pregnancy works and anything like that, and just like so naive. And she's like, "Yeah, nice meeting you for the first time," to Doug, right? Like, don't tell him you've seen me. I thought that was really funny. But Raymond's another great character, very pure-hearted, one of the rare ones.
Yeah, very true.
So if we look back at the 6, I'm curious, which would you say is your favorite episode if you had to pick one?
Now I'm just looking at my overviews of each to make sure I weigh.
Actually, I got to think about this for a second. Yeah.
That's hard, Liberty.
I think the run from like episode 3 to 5 is like very unimpeachable. But if I had to pick one, I think I would pick number 3 because it's kind of still before it gets very violent and very dark. And some of what I enjoyed the most was just hanging out with Dunk and Egg, just watching the daily life of like Hedge Knight and the logistics of the tournament and the responsibilities of knights and squires and exploring their friendship and them hanging out and looking at stars and eating big sandwiches and eggs. I'm not sure if it's episode 3, but like that type of vibe I really loved. But the ending of 3, the one that made my jaw drop, is also like so good and really got me. I think this one is the episode that was my peak enjoyment, even if I really love the others too.
Okay, I have an answer. It's weird because the first time I watched the show, I was not impressed with this episode. It was my least favorite. But after watching it a second time, and especially after talking about it, the last episode I think is my favorite. And the reason is because so many shows have this commercialistic tendency to like purposely end on a big cliffhanger that leaves you like really like hook, line, and sinker to be like, all right, they'll be back for the next season. Like we gotta make sure that this like it continues on. And this does not do that at all with this denouement episode where they tie up a bunch of loose ends and then they present the fact that like, all right, they are entering another door, but there's nothing super flashy. It's just like, this has been the story of the introduction of 2 characters in like the beginning of
it's a complete story, right? You don't feel like it's part 1 and then, okay, I gotta wait.
Exactly. So I'm simultaneously like really looking forward to season 2, but not in a way that makes me sort of like itchy in that addicted, annoying kind of way where it's like, ugh, now
it's
like
an open loop in your head.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like they clean the slate for the next dish. And like, I'm still hungry. I'm like, this was like the perfect appetizer. And now I'm ready for like whatever the main course of the next few seasons is going to be. Yeah, mad respect for doing episode 6 because they could have just sold out and ended on some big cliffhanger, which would have just annoyed me and made me like, you know what? Maybe I just won't watch the next season out of spite.
Yeah, well said. It's not a cheap ending.
Yes. Yeah. Well put.
Why not just round out the entire season then? And I'll say that the first couple episodes I love because they just set up a world so cleanly. Like I remember my first thoughts were, this is what A Knight's Tale would be if it wasn't a comedy and like it wasn't anachronistic. It's just like, this is just the world of jousting. Who doesn't want detailed stories of the world of jousting? I love the first 2. I will nail down and say, I may have to say the second one, largely just because it's a combination of the more intimate conversation. That's when we got the scene of like, people always called me dumb, and he's like, and like, so there's comedy, there's like, you see his earnestness in trying to get someone to validate that Sir Arlen was a real knight, yada, yada, yada. But then it climaxes with that 5v5 jousting scene that just blew my mind.
Yeah,
it was so fun. It was so addictive.
And Baylor, their big introduction of Baylor is also amazing.
Yeah. And then the end of the episode is him kind of realizing like, oh no, like, am I able? Like, there's just so much packed into that one episode for me.
Great picks. Let's move on to the novella. The differences, the changes they made. Which version do you prefer? Any big things that stand out? So I have a list of things that I've noted that are different. I'm going to just go through them. But if you have anything to add, please like stop me. And in general, I have to say that I like most of the changes they made. The novella is very, very lean. And almost everything that's in the novella is in the TV show. And then they added more, right? They added more scenes of Dunk and Egg hanging out, like the cooking and the goose eggs and all that stuff is new. Lionel Baratheon, that the guy we all love so much as a character, in the novella, he's basically like a name mentioned a few times, right? And then he joins the fight. So the whole like tug of war and the dance in his tent and the footstepping and all that stuff, the drunken like musings at the end of the night, all that has been added. And so this gives me a lot of confidence in the writers of the show. Like if they keep expanding this beyond the novellas or whatever, right? Even Raymond Fossaway, not a big deal in the novella. He's there, but not many details. Red and Beone, the two prostitutes at Sir Manfred's, they have some scene stealing stuff, right? The scene where there's like what's a hedge knight? Oh, it's like a night but sadder, right? That type of stuff. The engagement to Raymond I mentioned, all that stuff is great and it's all added. Another thing that stood out to me is like there are more hints about Egg not being who he appears to be than in the novella.
Yeah.
There's a scene where just how Egg knows so much about knights and he knows the crabber guy owns half the fleet and all that stuff. Like the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, this is kind of like almost like a sports fan, right? This guy is a knight fan. He knows everything about knights. But then you realize, no, he knows because he's living with these guys. He knows them personally. The novella, interestingly, keeps the ambiguity about as Dunk being knighted or not. They keep that more ambiguous. They change the ending where Maekar is like, apparently didn't give his permission to Egg to go squire in the book. It's assumed that he did. There's still a little bit of ambiguity.
Yeah,
but,
I wondered if it'll come up in another novella that it's like, oh, it turns out he didn't. But I noticed how it doesn't explicitly show that Maekar wasn't aware.
Yeah. They added a bunch of Sir Arlen flashbacks. In the novella, we know a lot less about him. The flea bottom childhood is all added. And then the fight. I saw the TV show first, so when I read it, in the novella, the fight is much, much shorter, right? And I understand, right? Some things are better shown. Some things in the book, you get a lot more of Dunk's inner monologue. And in the show, they were very clever about making him talk to his horses the whole time. In general, I kind of think I may prefer the TV show to the novella, which is rare, right? Adaptations are very, very hard. I thought this was great source material, but somehow I think they made it even better. I don't know if you guys agree.
I 100% agree. So I watched the show first and then got the book. This was my first time reading George Martin. I didn't read Game of Thrones or anything. The first thing that struck me was just, the writing is very clean, but I didn't actually find it very gripping. All of the names, which I obviously is like a characteristic of this sort of like fantasy world that he's describing, where they like periodically list off a lot of names like you very often get in the Bible if you've ever made that slog.
Yeah.
I mean, those sorts of things, which, are an aspect of what he's trying to do. Like, I have trouble with those just because I don't particularly enjoy them. And I felt like the characters had a lot more depth in the show. Jameson, what did you think?
I definitely agree. And then this is just another piece of evidence to a thesis that I've shared on my show several times since I cover books and short stories, which is short stories / novellas are way better at adaptations than books.
Arrival, right?
Yeah. Instead of the filmmaker having to cut, they actually are being given something short enough that they can add to it.
Oh, that's a great point.
And this is just another evidence of like the story had great bones and they had room to add to it instead of it becoming... Because then on top of that, if you've read it and you love the author, you're going into it with like, I'm going to be critical of everything they took out. And like, was that the right thing to take out or whatever? But with this, it's like, oh, we got everything from the novella and they just made it deeper and richer. So yeah, I definitely agree. I think this adaptation was really well done. It's one of those where everyone did their job, right? The writers did their job, the directors, the actors, the cinematographers, like everyone just kind of came together to make something really fun and entertaining. And so instead of like comparing a ton I just want to share a few things that are valuable from the novella that I liked. The first one is, you guys may do this too. I feel like everyone who wants to write or is a writer does this, but I kind of collect opening lines that I really like. And the opening line of the novella on this one says, "The spring rains had softened the ground, so Dunk had no trouble digging the grave."
It's a good one.
And that's good.
It is really good.
The way that, how many books have started with a landscape description, but then within half a sentence, all of a sudden, like, oh, that took a turn. Like, that was not what I was expecting. So, such a great opening line. There's a line during the fight scene, I believe, where he kind of is resorting back to who he is internally. And he says he could vanquish Sir Duncan the Tall, but not Dunk of Flea Bottom. Like, he just kind of I'm going back to my scrappy roots. And then maybe the best quote, which goes back to what we were discussing earlier of like the purity of his purpose versus the intellectualism of the Targaryens and stuff. Or is there no true knight? I guess he's in the better comparison line. There's a moment where he's remembering something from Sir Arlen and he quotes him. So this is Sir Arlen saying, "A hedge knight is the truest kind of knight. Other knights serve the lords who keep them or from whom they hold their lands. But we serve where we will for men whose causes we believe in. Every knight vows to protect the weak and innocent, but we keep that vow best, I think."
Yeah, that's good.
And so I read that quote, and we've talked about a lot of these points of the portrayal, and it's like, that's true. Like, he's the one knight who is really just doing his oath because he's not factoring in geopolitical factors.
He's not doing it because someone told him to, right? Or he's going to lose the hand that feeds him if he doesn't.
Yeah. The only real change that I noted that actually was very interesting to me, because it's not just about adding more depth, it's like fundamentally changing something in the character. In the novella, there is not a scene of Egg attempting to kill Aerion.
Oh, yeah.
Like when he's walking into the room with the dagger, like that's not in the novella. And so like that's adding a more sinister bent to fun and pure little Egg, who we know ends up being kind of a crazy king, but right now he's just been the helpful and supportive little squire. And so it's like, but we're starting to see the seeds. Of like,
it's the dark side of the force, right? There's a seed in him, and it shows the necessity of taking
his
him out.
Anakin moments.
Yeah, he needs to be taken out of that environment because he could turn like Aerion. And when they mentioned like, oh, Aerion as a child was a nice child too. He likes fishing and this, that. It shows like you're not born bad, right? But in that environment, that's a big risk.
Yeah.
I also want to highlight the point you made about this novella being the perfect kind of seed for an adaptation, because I'm rereading out loud Project Hail Mary with my son right now, and I saw the film and I really liked it. But you see that with a longer novel, you have to cut so much. I love how in the book you spend so much time. I don't want to give too many spoilers in case someone has seen the film or read the book yet, but with the main character, you spend so much time alone with him. And then when he's not alone anymore, that makes a bigger difference. And then you spend so much time when he's not alone that by the end, like the relationship has had so much time to build, right? While in a film, you have to compress all of that in a couple hours, right? So I felt like this novella being so lean was the perfect foundation. So I'm really looking forward to the next one.
Fun fact, just on what you were just saying, apparently the first cut of Hail Mary was over 4 hours long.
Oh, I want to see that cut.
Me too. I'm hoping that they release it in some capacity. Like, it would be like the one time I go buy a DVD.
Yeah, do like Das Boot, right? You have the theatrical and then the miniseries.
They did a viewing with some of their director friends, and everyone was like, you got to make it way shorter.
Yeah, well, I mean, that happens. I feel like that happens with almost every movie where the director does exactly what they want, and then it's like, yeah, this is too long for theatrical release.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure for commercial results, you need it to be shorter, but I do wish they would release the full one on like Blu-ray or whatever for the super fans.
Yeah.
Agreed. But back to Night of the Seven Kingdoms. One thing about the novella is that when Dunk finally assembles his team, the novella was so lean in comparison to the show that it seemed not believable to me that these like random people would come help him. And this was in spite of the fact that I'd seen the show first, and reading the novella, I still felt like there's not enough like who are these people to Dunk? Like, it doesn't make sense that like, oh, I'll risk my life and maybe die for this. There just wasn't enough there to establish the context that made it believable.
That's a good point.
Which I found kind of amazing considering I saw the show first.
That's immersion.
Yeah, right?
So wrapping up, the last thing I want to ask you about is, what are our hopes for season 2, right? Because I haven't read the second novella yet, but I know I'll read it before season 2 comes out.
Should we?
I'm not patient enough to wait. But I also think if there's a good chance that the show is even better than the novella, I feel like it'll be just an upgrade, right? It'll still be even better, even if I know some of the plot points. So I don't think it'll spoil it too much for me. But maybe I'm just being greedy, but I kind of wish they would change the format to an hour-long show. Would that ruin it? Or do you guys think it would be even better? Or am I crazy here?
I think there was a content amount. Like they were already plumped up so much and developed the novella to fill out just 6 episodes. I just think there's not enough content for them to have done 6 hours as opposed to the shorter episodes that they did.
I think it makes sense for this one, but they've shown that they can write really good stuff. And I think the pacing could have been a tiny bit slower and more time to hang out with Dunk and Egg and develop the relationship, more like tournament stuff that they could have expanded enough without ruining it or diluting it too much. But I haven't read the second one, so maybe the second one is even leaner, or maybe there's more stuff that could more easily be expanded. I've heard, and I don't want to spoil too much, but I've heard that second one is basically all new characters. But there are so many great characters from this one. I don't know if some of the expansion could be that some Lionel stuff comes. I don't know. Maybe that's greedy. Maybe that would ruin it.
We still get Dunk though, right?
Yeah, it's all Dunk and Egg, but everybody else is different, I think.
Okay.
They're in a different part of the kingdoms with completely different people. I did start reading the second one before I realized we were only covering the first one. And like the only thing, it's not really a spoiler, but just it is like a year and a half or 2 years in the future. Like it's a given time for them to establish more of a bond as knight and squire, and we're kind of seeing where they're at rather than building up to that. But to the note of like, could it be longer? I don't know. I think it is a razor thin line between I love every second of it and I wish there was more to, okay, like they're just dragging it out now. And so I think the best shows are the ones that leave us with this feeling of like, I wish there was more, but I can also respect that they knew when to call it. Like that is one of the best things about the streaming era to me, is the fact that to some extent, you know, if you're factoring in ad placement and stuff, I guess there's still this consideration, but to some extent it is more, we tell the story as long as it needs to be told. Yeah. It's not about like fitting a 22-minute time slot or a 42-minute time slot. It's like, does this episode need to be 37 minutes and then the next one is an hour and 10? Like, we really have more liberty to just tell the story the way it is most effective, which is a beautiful thing to me.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's wise. You're probably wiser than I am. That's the thing, right? Wanting more is a good thing. I have to just embrace it.
Yeah.
Way better than wanting less.
Yeah. Consider the alternative, sir.
Exactly.
I do have to sneak in before we wrap. I found myself dwelling quite a bit on like, why do we love Dunk? Why is he such a lovable protagonist? I was really just trying to figure this out, and I came up with a few different things that contribute. I think, first of all, we live in an age of complex heroes / anti-heroes, and that's cool. Like, I'm glad we're in this place where like we can show that there's depth to people, and even good people make bad choices, and even bad people have like real reasons that led to them making those choices, yada, yada, yada. But those come with what I would call like a moral clarity tax, where we all of a sudden in our viewing, we're having to make judgment calls about, where do I align with this choice in particular? Do I agree? Was this the right move? Were they stepping across a line here? Like, we're mentally like way more invested in a way that's draining. But with him, there's just this purity of like, no, he's always going to do the right thing. And in some ways you could say that's oversimplistic, but it's kind of a breath of fresh air that in a world where most stories are that complex, it's like, oh, it's kind of nice to just have the guy who the world he's in is complex, and that's going to make things hard, and that's where the real drama comes from. But like, I know what he's trying to do, and I know why he's trying to do it, is just kind of a nice break from the norm right now. But more importantly, we always appreciate when there's a hero that we don't see as better than us in at least some way, because then it feels more attainable. If he was intellectual and massive, it'd be like, all right, there's no way I could compare to this guy. Like, what's the point of even trying to evaluate, like, if I think he's a good hero figure, because I can't touch that. But when we give him some advantages, like he's physical, but like, think about how rare his physical prowess was an advantage in this novella, in this first season. Like, sure, it ends up allowing him to take on Aerion after he's got the crap beat out of him in the first parts of the fight. And then maybe just the fact that he beats up Aerion when Aerion was breaking Tensil's fingers. But like, his physicality really didn't come into play very often.
And even that, right? He's clumsy. He's always bumping his head in the doors. And
so having him be like thick as a castle wall and not playing to his advantages very often it gives us the ability to kind of step in and be like, all right, if he can do it, then I can do it. Cause like, he's not better than me. Like he's not like a league of his own compared to where I'm at. And then the last thought I had, which this came from a conversation I was having with Claude, so I can't take full credit for it, but it pointed out praxis from Aristotle, like the difference between poesis, which is like to create something with an intent of achieving something, and praxis where action is the goal. The only goal is to do the thing. And that is so true of like, you just track that to his choices throughout. Like when he runs into save Tencel, he clearly was not thinking about the repercussions of hurting a prince. He was just thinking about, I have to save this innocent person from being hurt. Like he is very much just focused on what is the right thing to do without factoring in what are the consequences of my choices here. And that's something that's also pretty admirable. So anyway, those are kind of the reasons why I found I'm drawn to Dunk as a character compared to the landscape of heroes that we see in most shows these days.
No, that's great. And as you say, right, in a world where everybody's a anti-hero, everybody's like, sometimes it's good to have just someone you can really root for, someone with some purity, some clarity, a good-hearted person, right? We need some of these. I think we forgot that.
Yeah.
I love a lot of the thoughts that you shared there. One thing that came to mind was we referenced Anakin from Star Wars a little earlier. And I'm kind of wondering, there is this trend to be like, I just saw a post this morning about Cinderella's stepsisters. It's now like a backstory of her stepsisters, and like, oh, they're actually not that bad if you just like look into their characters. I find that a little aggravating because it's like, you know what, there are some like genuinely like bad people, and like, sure, the context of how they grew up is definitely going to inform this like bad outcome, but it doesn't justify the outcome if it leads to, something that hurts someone else or something like that. And so extrapolating forward, I'm kind of wondering, all right, I really like Egg right now. I would actually love if, and I don't think Lucas achieved this in the Star Wars prequels, because even after he killed those children and whatnot, I still actually really liked Anakin a lot. I was like, oh man, he's so dope. He's about to turn into this like jet black samurai, the Darth Vader, and he's still badass and everyone loves him. And that actually, saying that reminds me of like watching the second Dune in the theater, and people in the audience were like cheering by the end. I'm like, you guys don't realize, like, this guy, you should not be cheering for this guy. Like,
yeah, it's about like the danger of saviors.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a cautionary tale. In Dune, I had the experience that you should have with Anakin. And so I would be curious to see if the show evolves in such a way that you get to see Egg becoming, clearly he's going to be like some sort of evil king who does some bad things. And like the fortune teller said, they're going to be glad that he's gone. I would love if the writers were good enough to actually, by the end of it, make me legitimately hate Egg. That would be a really cool experience while Dunk stays true to form the whole way, despite like all
kind of a Breaking Bad arc.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
Well, it's kind of, using the Star Wars example again, it's kind of like if Obi-Wan was just dumb. like the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan. If Obi-Wan was not like smart, but he just was morally that pure. And I mean, Qui-Gon's even kind of the Arlen, right? Like he's like, do I measure up to my mentor? I just want to mentor this kid that way. I would love if they can achieve that balance of showing the darkening and the regression of Egg while showing how Dunk is still, and we know Dunk goes on to do great things, so it's not that he's just insignificant, but that he maintains this level of like, no, I'm still just, praxis, I'm just here to protect the innocent. And the contrast of Egg, like kind of sinking lower and lower into his Targaryen tendencies. I would love to see them pull that off. That'd be incredible.
I could definitely easily imagine like a show ending clincher where Dunk is in the service of Egg as king.
Ooh.
And Dunk betrays the king in honor of higher principles.
Ooh.
Something like
I want you to write it now.
Yeah. Well, actually, I have my own season 8 that is a complete rewriting of what happened in the show that ties up all of the loose endings. Like once AI generated video is good enough, like I'm going to unleash this on the world. Because I need my own catharsis. I still don't have catharsis from that show. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of potential here in terms of like these days people are either like, oh, let's just go full anti-hero. Almost since like Leopold Bloom with James Joyce, honestly, who started that whole shenanigan. But it would be great to have a show that actually like braids these two ideas together in a really elegant way. And based on this first season, it seems like the show writers absolutely have the chops to pull it off. But we'll see.
Fingers crossed the studio doesn't get too involved because of the success of season 1 and change it fundamentally.
Whatever happens, I have a feeling that in a year we'll be back here to discuss season 2.
Can't wait.
I really enjoyed this, guys.
Have they started filming?
Yeah, I think they're filming right now.
Oh, excellent. Okay, because that kid is going to grow up fast. Well, I'm only going to start watching shows that have like a young kid in it so that they have to pump out seasons quickly. Like Pluribus. I love Pluribus, and it's going to be like 2 years before we see another season.
Well, even then, that's not a guarantee, because look at Stranger Things.
True.
We, by season 5, we had 25-year-olds playing 16-year-olds. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hope it doesn't happen with that.
All right, so word of the day is praxis.
I was going to say words of the day should just be get up, right?
Oh, yeah, that's even better.
That's ultimate.
That's lesson of the day.
Yeah, that's lesson of the day.
Word of the day is praxis. Lesson of the day is get up.
We're turning this into a Sesame Street episode.
This is fun.
Guys, please tell the listener where they can find more about you. If they want to re-listen to more of your stuff, where they can find you. Tinker, what's the best place?
tinkerthinking.com. It's a blog with, like 1,000 essays and lots of short stories. I've published 2 volumes of short stories dubbed the Lucilius Parables. And then latest book from Infinite Books is White Mirror, which is a collection of optimistic sci-fi, which you should definitely buy.
Right now, pause this podcast player and go buy it. And if you want to learn more about it, Tinker and I, and with Dylan, the editor, recorded a whole podcast just about White Mirror and the experience of writing it, about
it was a lot of fun.
The stories themselves and all that went into it. So please check it out. Jameson, what about you? Where should the listener go?
I'll just say go to wherever you consume podcasts and look up Becoming the Main Character. It's where I retell the greatest fiction ever written with a specific lens of the character choices and how that leads to their success or demise. I just released part 1 of Project Hail Mary, actually. I've been mostly doing classics, but this is the first time I've done a contemporary novel. And then from there, in the description of the episode, you can find links to the social channels or my Substack, where I am fleshing out my own school of philosophy called Protagonism, that believes that by using the rules of great story writers, you can use those same rules to script a better life for yourself. So
definitely go check it out. And if you don't know where to start, I'll recommend the Lord of the Ring episodes are great. And if you want something a bit shorter, The Hounds of Baskerville, the Sherlock Holmes one, I had never read that story, so I kind of lived it through your podcast, which is kind of like half a bridge audiobook version, half analysis. I love that format that you created. It's kind of like a hybrid of multiple things.
I've coined the term podiobook is what I do, because it's long for a podcast, but it's still like 20 to 25% as long as the actual audiobook is. So it's a condensed telling, but it is the full story start to finish.
Great audiobooks. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Okay.
I'll play us out.
Cheers.
Knight and a small lad walking down the road. One's got a sword, the other's got a secret. A knight with no lord, a boy with no hair, a realm full of drama, and we're pulling up a chair. So sing of Sir Duncan, tall and true, and little leg Esquire, tried and true. Now gather ye small folk, pour yourself an ale, for Duncan and Egg and 3 guys telling tale.
Bye-bye.